That's really interesting. I think this is always like throwing everything in. And my next question is kind of almost the worst question I should be asking, which is, are there any kind of hidden gems out there that you should be squeezing in? And kind of, is there something that actually you cannot miss? That's really, yeah, kind of thinking about the actual spaces to give students to reflect as well, I think can be, like, that's such an important thing to build into your time and your kind of itinerary. And I'm curious, like when you're in those spaces or back at the hotel, or like, what are your top tips for actually getting students to reflect and really think about what they're experiencing? Please. That's really cool, having that kind of continued theme. And I think so often kind of students think about their learning just of like, this is the trip, kind of thinking of it in isolation, and any of those opportunities to link earlier work or kind of post work. Um, and I also loved your idea of kind of getting the students to share stuff with their families as well, because it's something I always hear about parents like, we just want to know how it was. And their teenagers come back and like, yeah, it was good. And you're like, what did you do? Tell me everything. So any opportunity to build in that. Something that I'm really curious about your insights here is, as teachers, we're always trying to find that balance between giving students the space and the time for kind of exploration and kind of individual time to discover. But we're also thinking about kind of structured, instruction as well. Wondering kind of what tips you might have when you're thinking about going on trips, the time and the spaces to kind of build that balance between structured learning and kind of exploration. That's Yeah, I think that's like the perfect opportunity to think about this. Like so much of this experiential learning is to let students go out and see what's happening in the world around them. And DC, you think of it as this kind of historic place, but history is in the making at the moment. And I'm curious, if you have any thoughts, any advice for schools in preparing your students to kind of think critically around the current events that we're seeing and what they'll encounter in DC. That's really interesting. I think it's, yeah, it's such a um, an interesting time to be prompting these students to think about this, and to be in DC. It's the perfect time to, yeah, see it, get them to have their own minds and their own views of everything. Um, I'm interested, like, if you, from your guys' experience, have been seeing any kind of anxiety from parents, or anything that you should be um, prepping teachers to have these discussions with parents ahead of a trip. That's really interesting. And I think especially there's always that balance, that teachers feel, of kind of giving information to parents, and, what's too much, what's too little. But certainly kind of when there are nerves, it is nice to have that more information out there, especially. I'm curious, to you all, have you seen any topics come up on your DC trips that have been kind of handled particularly well, or badly? Horror stories are always important to share as well. But yeah, like anything that's come up on any trips that you've seen that you thought like that was a really great, unique learning moment, or like, oh, I wish we'd handled it slightly differently. I'm curious, like slightly transitioning from, obviously the trip is this amazing experience, it's exhausting, and a huge amount of work, but so is all of the pre-trip stuff as well and the planning. And we've kind of touched upon, kind of the communication with parents beforehand and kind of how to ease that. But I'm curious if there's any, must-haves that you can think about to kind of structure and ease your way in when it comes to, whether you do have a parent meeting, student meetings, kind of doing all the things that you need to do. Love it. I feel like, yeah, the number one question is like, when are the rooming lists being released? When do I know who I'm going to be rooming with? And I think, yeah, having a clear answer and a clear policy. Know a lot of people who will literally give out who's in the room as you arrive in the hotel. Um, the more in advance you get, the more kind of like shuffling of groups, or if we could do this and you can agree to that, yeah, which is always a nightmare. I had another question, which was, what's one piece of prep that saves headaches later? um, but I'm also going to be a bit cheeky and jump in myself to answer this question, because I do want to kind of mention, like, it is a huge amount of work doing these trips, and that is something that having a system in place, for example, Chaperone, could be really, really useful for you. So, the idea of Chaperone is that you have this kind of trip portal which has all of that information about the trip, the itinerary, resources, packing lists. Um, and one of the key things that we hear from teachers is how it does reduce that kind of email backwards and forwards communication, because suddenly, you've got your full-time job as a teacher, which, let's face it, takes up a huge amount of your time. Um, and now suddenly you're planning a trip as well. So it's a lot. And I think having some kind of system in place is really useful. One of the key things that we have is the ability to assign tasks to students and parents, which seems to be, one of our most beloved features with teachers, of being able to have automated reminders going out to parents that things that they need to do, because parents don't always listen. So like that's, some of the benefits that I think is worth mentioning. Also, we have on our website a free resource, which is a trip planning checklist. It's basically a spreadsheet that's kind of got a load of things that you can do, where you can edit the kind of the due date, as it were, and it kind of helps you stay on track. So I will email you with the link to that. But I think, there's so many things to do when it comes to planning your trips, and, whether or not you use Chaperone, but, you might want to use this kind of, yeah, the checklist, which I think is helpful. Right, I'm going to kind of ask now a few kind of specific questions to each one of our panelists. I feel a bit like a game show host right now. I've got the names and my piece of paper here. Um, but yeah, so Amy, you're up first. What's one thing you wish you had known before leading your first DC trip? Interesting. That actually is perfect for my next question, which is to Monique. What's your top tip for keeping large groups moving smoothly? That's awesome. Ivory, what's your best strategy for avoiding teacher burnout during the trip? Oh, I love that. I really love that. Um, Monique, I've kind of mentioned, touched on this a little bit, but you've got experience of dealing with these really big groups. Beyond thinking about your itinerary and spreading it out, do you just have any kind of hacks for thinking about saving teacher energy when you're dealing with, yeah, all of these kids? Amazing. Tegan, I've got a question for you. How do you balance kind of safety, um, freedom, and learning when you're traveling with a big group of students? Amazing. Anne, what do you have a recommendation for a restaurant or a food stop in DC that you think groups should try and visit? Perfect. Amy, what do you think about kind of having to balance kind of the must-sees, everything that we've spoken about, with also giving the students space to explore and just kind of have that, I like that kind of structured free time. Oh, Amy, you're on mute. There we go. I love it. Um, Ivory, I think I'm especially interested given your role kind of working with OSU and kind of bringing the new generation of teachers out there. But if you had just one piece of advice to give to a new trip leader, what would it be? Amazing. I love it. I wonder if we could kind of maybe we can get to a few questions at the end, so I know we're running out of time now. So if people do have questions, I want to pop it in the chat. But I'm curious before we do that, we've spoken a lot about, um, the hard work it takes from teachers doing these trips. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget, and Ivory, you spoke about this, but it's easy to forget why we do this. Like taking students out on these trips is truly the most engaging way to offer these kind of learning. Um, and I think especially in DC, it can be such an inspiring place. So I wonder if anybody's got any kind of anecdotes or student stories of things just to remind ourselves why we're doing this. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, not putting, oh, sorry, I was about to say, I'm not putting anyone else on the spot to add, but Amy, go for it. I love that. It's, yeah, it's travel and seeing all of this is, yeah, is why we do it. So, yeah, I want to kind of wrap up now as I see we're running out of time. But like, firstly, thank you to our incredible panelists. I so appreciate you making the time to be here. And to our wonderful participants as well. I really hope that this was kind of useful information. I have actually been able to record this, so I will share it with folk. The other thing that I want to share with you is if anybody um, is interested in using Chaperone, we actually have a discount code. So you can scan this QR code, and then you just put in your trip dates and details, and then you get a discounted access to Chaperone. Or you can simply just learn more about it as well. So feel free to use that. And I just want to wrap up finally by saying we have another webinar coming up in November, November 6th, all about trip leader training. So this is going to be really useful if you kind of want to think about your best practices as a trip leader, or you are actually in charge of other, training trip leaders. And Tegan, I know that you guys at Insight have a cool webinar that would be great if you could share as well. Tegan, I can also share the link, the sign up link to that in the email that I'll send out to everybody as well. So yes, you can see all of that. Um, but yeah, guys, thank you so much. I hope this was useful, and I'm so appreciative of you joining us. And reach out to if you have any questions or anything. But yes, thank you so much. Uh, no, of course, guys. Yeah, thank you. You are absolute rock stars for joining us.